I'm back in the cockpit, and we're going to do part two now of our A320 video. So this will be now the pushback, start, and taxi, and takeoff, climb out, the whole thing. Um, so without further ado, let's get going. So right now we're sitting at the gate. We are powered on ground power. We need to turn up our displays. So those are switches are located here. And we've got some integrated lighting down here as well as up top. So first thing we're going to want to do now is turn on our APU, which is located here, and we start that up. And we get our emergency lighting on, our seat belts on. Okay, turn on our fuel pumps. Turn off our packs. And once the APU has come up to full running, you'll see here, this will change to available. You'll see available show up in the screen here. And then the APU will be ready to provide power to the aircraft, at which point we can disconnect the ground power system. So we'll just wait for that now to power up. It usually takes about 60 seconds or so, maybe about 60 seconds for the APU power up. There we go, and now that it's come up and it says available, now we can switch to APU bleed. Our APU generator is on, so we can turn off our external power now, and now we're running on APU power. APU stands for Auxiliary Power Unit, for those of you who don't know. So we'll go back to our services page, disconnect our ground power unit, and then we'll go into our pushback phase. So over here we turn off our pushback system, turn on our pushback system, sorry. And we prepare the aircraft now for pushback. So we'll turn our beacons on.
Flight attendants, arm doors, and cross-check.
That informs the cabin that we're about to push back. And we will call for the tug. As you can see, the tug is moving now towards the aircraft to connect. Okay, we're now set up for the push. We'll disengage the parking brake and start our push. The more times you press the button, the faster the aircraft will move. So if you press it twice to go back, you will need to press it again to go forward, to keep it going, to slow down or speed up. Same thing with making your turn. If you press it once, it'll start turning slowly, as you can see by the curved line. If you press it again, it'll make the turn a little tighter. Press it again, it'll make it even tighter. So pressing it back will bring it back to its original setting. So while we're doing our pushback, we can get our engine started. We turn our ignition system on, and then starting number 2. That's pretty good there. I think we'll just stop our pushback there, set our parking brake, and then click this button again to release the tug. We'll just wait for engine number 2 to come up to full. Then we can engage the number 1 starter. Also, make sure that your throttles are set to idle. Okay. Number 2 is good start. Now we'll start number 1. Your APU is providing power now to the engine, so that's what's creating enough power for the engine to spin over and start. Okay, so down here is a panel that allows you, it's called your ECAM panel. You can use this to control what displays here in this display. So right now it's showing engine operation. It's showing what the engines are doing. And you can switch that to your bleeds. It'll show all of your different aspects of your aircraft. There's your hydraulic cabin pressure. That's your air conditioning system. There's your electrical system on the aircraft. There's your hydraulics, your fuel. And the one you're going to want to look at before we start taxiing is this one, the FCTL or flight control setting. And this is where, so earlier in our FMC, we put in a up trim of 1.2. So by setting your trim, you can roll your trim wheel and set it to 1.2, which it reads here. So also, before you do your taxi, you're going to want to do a flight controls check. So left and right, up and down, and rudder left, rudder right. And that's your flight controls checked. Now, there is a takeoff config system on this aircraft, so what you're going to want to do first is set your flaps to takeoff setting, which is 1. You're going to raise your ground spoilers to the armed position, turn off your ignition system, auto brakes to max. Once you've done that, hit takeoff config, and then you'll get a list right here. If anything is in blue, then you need to clear it. A lot of people don't know where this button to clear the cabin check. So I discovered where that is, and that's by clicking the all call button on the overhead panel, which is that one. That clears the cabin ready check. Once that's all done, you can hit takeoff config again to clear the test. It's now normal. So our TCAS is now on standby. APU bleeds are on. So now we're going to turn off the APU bleed, turn on our packs. And that's it. That's the aircraft. Switch our taxi lights on, and that's the aircraft ready for taxi. Okay, so let's start our taxi now. We'll release the parking brake. In most cases, the aircraft should start rolling ahead on its own. If it doesn't, just give it a little bump of throttle. And then back to idle. You really don't need to give it much throttle at all to get the aircraft to return to idle settings. So then we'll taxi over now to runway 28 and get ready for our departure. Okay, so we're here at the hold point for runway 28 and holding short. So to set up the aircraft for takeoff, basically we're going to turn on our landing lights, set our taxi lights to take off, strobes on. Then we'll come down here, set our transponder to TARA.
Flight attendants, please prepare for takeoff.
There's the announcement. And then we'll taxi into position on the runway. Landing lights on, strobe lights on. Cabin's been informed. We'll move on to the runway now for takeoff. Now, we're confirmed we're on runway 28 and we are ready for takeoff. Okay, so I'll set our chrono on both clocks. Shows up here and here in the bottom. And we're now ready for takeoff. Now, because we set a flex temperature, you are going to see that temperature reflected here. So we're going to set our throttles now to stabilize. Right there. You'll see it show up. It'll say manual flex plus 65. So that's our throttle setting for takeoff. Or thrust setting, if you will. Allow the aircraft to accelerate to V1, and you'll hear the call out, V1, rotate. And there's the rotate. Positive rate, gear up. So you keep the aircraft on flex plus 65 until we reach about 1,500 feet. Okay, we're at 1,500 feet now. We'll engage the autopilot and we'll set the throttles back to throttle climb. Flaps up. Oh, not quite yet. Oops. Now the aircraft will handle the throttle settings on its own. We've reached 200 knots. Flaps up. So now we're on what's called a manual setting. So we're following a manual flight plan out of just basically the runway heading. So now we want to go to Texid. This is our next waypoint. Hit direct, and the aircraft will start now flying to Texid, which is now 51 nautical miles away on a heading of 283. And that is the climb out for the A320. Once you've got up to past like 5,000 feet, you can disarm the speed brake. You can turn off your nose wheel lights. Bring your landing lights down to off, but not all the way down. That'll turn off the external landing lights, but keep the internal ones on. As you can see, you still have a landing light indicator here on the display. Also, something I forgot to do before takeoff, you can turn off the APU once you got the engine started and your taxi. The APU doesn't need to stay on after that. And of course, once you pass 10,000 feet, then you can switch your landing lights off completely. And that's it. That concludes the pushback, taxi, takeoff, and climb out phase of the A320 from fly-by-wire. I hope you enjoyed watching. I'll see you again next time.